It's 3 a.m., and I'm bolt upright in bed again, shaking off the tail end of another nightmare. My heart hammers in my chest as I stare into the darkness of our bedroom. A cold sweat clings to my skin, my t-shirt damp and twisted. Beside me, Alyssa stirs faintly at the disturbance. In the dim light, I see her dark hair fanned over the pillow, her breathing slow and peaceful. I exhale carefully, relieved that I haven't woken her. She doesn't deserve to be haunted by my nightmares. I run a hand over my face, willing the gruesome images to fade. It's always the same dream, a twisted replay of events that happened almost 2 years ago. In the dream, I'm not a calm, rational man, I'm an avenger. I find myself standing in the parking lot of a supermarket on a gray afternoon, rain slanting down. I see her across the lot, entangled with him. My blood boils over. In the dream, I don't hold back. I charge forward and do what I stop myself from doing in reality. I beat him to a broken mess on the asphalt while she screams. Sometimes the dream goes even further, my hands closing around his throat or around hers. I wake each time just before doing something that would land me in a prison cell for life. Tonight's variation was especially brutal. I dreamed I had him strapped to an operating table in my hospital's surgical ward. In one hand, I held a syringe filled with something lethal, in the other a stack of court orders and termination letters bearing their names. His eyes pleaded with me as I pressed the needle to his skin. Behind me, my ex-wife stood weeping, begging mercy, but I had none. They had shown me none. I swallow hard and swing my legs out of bed, planting my feet on the cool hardwood floor. My breathing is ragged. It was just a dream. Just a dream. Thank God these episodes are coming less often now. In the first months after everything happened, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing their betrayal or imagining vengeance. The nightmares hit every week, sometimes twice. These days they come maybe once in a couple of months. It's progress, I suppose. I quietly slip out of the bedroom, leaving Alyssa sleeping softly. Patting down the hall, I grab a glass of water in the kitchen and flick on the small light above the sink. The faint hum of the refrigerator is the only sound. 2 years have passed since that day. The day I saw red. 2 years since my entire world came crashing down. Since I discovered my wife's infidelity and set in motion a plan for retribution that would make them wish they'd never met me. Alyssa knows pieces of my past, but not the gory details of how vindictive I became. I keep those parts buried. She only knows that I went through a bad divorce and that I was deeply hurt. She doesn't press for details, one of the many reasons I cherish her. I often wonder what she'd think if she knew the full story. Would she understand why I did what I did? Or would she be afraid of the ruthless man I was then? I stare at my reflection in the dark kitchen window, water glass in hand. In the faint light, I look gaunt, shadows carving hollows under my eyes. Get a grip, Daniel, I tell myself. The past is over. And yet it isn't, not entirely. The events of those days left scars on me, some visible, most not. The nightmares are simply old wounds aching. To truly understand, I have to revisit it all from the beginning. I have to relive that year. The year I lost everything I thought I knew and orchestrated an unforgiving payback. I take a long drink of water, steadying myself as I lean on the counter. It's time to tell the story of how I won and how they lost everything. The calm before chaos. By any measure, 2023 was shaping up to be a challenging year for me even before my marriage imploded. My name is Dr. Daniel Carter, and in 2023 I was 33 years old, married for 7 years to Rachel Carter, N.E. Thompson. We lived in Columbus, Ohio, in a cozy 2-bedroom house in the suburb of Clintonville. I was an attending physician in the emergency department at Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center, and Rachel worked as a financial manager at Midland Life and Casualty, a large insurance firm headquartered downtown. We were a hard-working couple with busy careers, comfortable finances, and what I thought was a strong partnership built on years of love and trust. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the moment things started to crack, even if I didn't recognize it at the time. January 2023. That's when the troubles began. It was as if fate had decided to toss every stressor it could at us all at once. First, we had just closed on our first house after years of saving. It was exciting, but the 90-year-old house needed a slew of renovations. Almost immediately, we were sparring with contractors over missed deadlines and surprise expenses. Our weekends, which we'd hoped would be spent turning that house into a home, devolved into heated discussions about leaking plumbing, and whether we could afford to replace the drafty windows this year or next. The Clintonville fixer-upper had charm, but it was testing our patience and our bank account. At the same time, both of our careers were ramping up in intensity. I had recently been promoted to a more senior role in the ER. After completing my residency and a few additional years of grinding through overnight shifts, I was finally one of the more experienced attending physicians. That meant more responsibilities, supervising newer residents, leading department committees, and dealing with hospital administration on top of the life and death pressure cooker that is the emergency room. I was pulling 12-hour shifts regularly, often at odd hours. I loved the work, treating everything from heart attacks to car crash injuries, but it left me exhausted many days. The adrenaline of the ER is a high like no other, but when I crashed, I crashed. Many mornings I'd stumble home after a night shift, collapse into bed without even eating, only to wake up and do it again. Rachel's job was no less demanding. At Midland Life and Casualty, she had been steadily climbing the ranks in the finance department. By early 2023, at 31 years old, she was a senior financial analyst overseeing a small team. She was sharp, ambitious, and exceptionally good at what she did. Her firm had landed a major project, some sort of merger deal or acquisition, which meant late nights poring over balance sheets and meetings with big clients. I remember the excited gleam in her green eyes when she first told me about it. "If I can help close this deal, Dan, it could mean a promotion by end of year," she had said in January, cheeks flushed with anticipation. I was proud of her. Nobody deserved success more than Rachel, who had worked full-time through her MBA and always aimed higher. We toasted with champagne that night to new opportunities, never imagining the cost that would come with them. Physically, we made a striking couple back then. I'm just over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders kept fit from years of lifting patients and the occasional recreational jog along the Scioto River trails. I keep my brown hair cropped short in a no-nonsense style, both for convenience in a hospital setting and because I started spotting a few grays in it. I've been told by colleagues that I have a reassuring presence, steady brown eyes, a strong jaw, an air of confidence. In the ER that helped calm terrified patients. At home, I hoped it made me a dependable husband. I wasn't movie star handsome, but I was comfortable in my own skin. Rachel was stunning. She had that wholesome Midwest beauty that turned heads. At 5'7" and about 130 pounds, she was slim and kept in shape with regular yoga classes. She had wavy chestnut brown hair that cascaded to her shoulder blades and caught the sunlight with reddish highlights. Her eyes were a vivid hazel green that could shift to blue or green depending on her mood and the light. I used to tell her they were like a kaleidoscope of forest colors. She moved with a natural grace, whether she was striding through the office in heels and a pencil skirt or dancing around our living room in pajama shorts. I adored her figure, athletic legs toned from her morning runs, and gentle curves that fit perfectly against me at night. She could be wearing old sweatpants and one of my oversized t-shirts and still look irresistibly sexy to me. 7 years of marriage hadn't diminished my attraction to her one bit. If anything, our bond felt deeper. We'd been through a lot together: graduations, family funerals, job changes, the stressful house purchase. We'd always leaned on each other and celebrated each other's wins. We had our inside jokes, our Sunday morning pancake ritual, our whispered conversations late at night about our dreams for the future. We talked about having kids in an abstract someday way. The plan was to get the house in order and then maybe try for a baby in a year or two, once her career hit a comfortable point and my schedule stabilized. In those early months of 2023, we were like two runners in a relay race, each carrying our baton of responsibilities, sometimes passing them off, sometimes sprinting together. It wasn't easy. Often we'd be ships passing in the night, me coming home at 7 a.m. from a long shift as she was rushing out the door with a coffee in hand. But we made the time we could. We'd collapse on the couch in the evenings when we both managed to be home, eating takeout and watching an episode of something trivial on Netflix until one or both of us dozed off. We tried for date nights on the rare weekends we were free, dinners in the Short North Arts District or catching a late-night movie at the Lenox. Those nights felt precious and earned. Looking back, I realized we were slowly drifting onto parallel tracks, close but not truly intersecting as often as before. At the time, I reassured myself that this was temporary, just a high-pressure period. Once her big project was done and once my ER settled with new hires, we'd get our life back in balance. We'd go on that belated anniversary trip to Hocking Hills we'd talked about. We'd make lazy Sunday breakfast a thing again instead of both catching up on sleep or work. We just had to push through a little longer. That was the calm before the storm, because soon, new figures and influences would enter our lives, tilting the balance in ways I couldn't foresee. If I had paid closer attention, maybe I would have noticed the cracks forming in our seemingly solid marriage. Maybe I would have seen the subtle changes in Rachel's behavior for what they were, but I trusted her completely, and I was preoccupied juggling trauma codes and renovation bills. Hindsight shows me those red flags now, waving brightly in memory. At the time, I brushed them aside as insignificant. One of those flags was a name that started to come up in Rachel's conversations. Nathan Keener. I first heard of him in February, when Rachel came home one evening a little later than usual. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a late dinner. One benefit of being an ER doc is knowing my way around a knife, even if it's usually a scalpel. She walked in, hung up her coat, and sighed dramatically. "Tough day?" I asked, offering a sympathetic smile. I put down the knife and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. She smelled like winter air and her Chanel perfume. "The toughest," she groaned. "We had to redo half the financial projections for the Keystone merger when the CFO decided to change the structure last minute." She rolled her eyes and sank onto a bar stool at the kitchen island. "Oh, wow. Did you at least get it sorted out?" I poured her a glass of the red wine I'd opened. "More or less. I stayed late with Mr. Keener to make sure everything balanced. He's exacting, but I actually appreciate that." She took a grateful sip of wine and smiled. "Nathan Keener, the new vice president from Chicago I mentioned last week, he's heading our division now to oversee the merger. He's brilliant, Dan, but very detail-oriented. He's been working us hard." I remembered then. She had indeed mentioned a new VP briefly. Some hotshot the company had transferred in to supervise the big deal. I recalled her saying he was in his mid-40s, an experienced executive Midland, brought from their Chicago office specifically for this project. At the time, I didn't pay much attention. Senior management shuffles at her company were far from my mind when I was dealing with gunshot wounds in the ER. "Sometimes a tough boss can be a good thing," I offered, sliding the cutting board aside and focusing on her. "If he's pushing you, it's probably because he trusts your abilities." She nodded vigorously, a strand of her chestnut hair falling loose from her bun. "Exactly. He gave me a lot of responsibility right off the bat. Honestly, I'm flattered. He said he'd heard great things about my work." Her eyes sparkled with pride. I felt a pang of delight on her behalf and squeezed her hand. "That's my rock star wife. Show them what you've got." Rachel beamed, and then, to my surprise, a faint blush tinted her cheeks. He did catch me off guard, though. He asked about us. My personal life, I mean. I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Personal life? Isn't that a bit forward for a new boss?" She shrugged, fiddling with the stem of her wine glass. "Not in a creepy way. We were making small talk, waiting for a report to run. He asked if I had family here in Columbus. I mentioned I was married, and he asked if we had kids or planned to." She rolled her eyes again, this time with a little grin. "You know how people love to ask that once you hit your 30s? "Ah, the kid question." I chuckled. We had encountered that from our own families frequently. "When are you two going to give us grandbabies?" The pressure was there, but we always said soon, soon, just not yet. "Yeah." I told him maybe in a year or two, after this merger stuff, hopefully. She took another sip of wine, then added, "Mr. Keener actually said something interesting. He advised me to hold off on getting pregnant until after the promotion cycle next year." "Can you believe that?" She let out a light laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I set down my own glass, an uncomfortable feeling creeping into my stomach. "He what? That's bold of him." She waved a hand quickly. "Oh, he wasn't being pushy exactly. More like friendly advice from someone who's seen a lot of careers. He said, 'Rachel, you're on the fast track. If you were my daughter, I'd tell you not to let anything slow you down this year, not even a baby. Promotions like the one you're aiming for don't come around often, and you deserve a clear shot at it.'" I frowned, trying to keep my voice neutral. "It's a bit presumptuous if you ask me. He barely knows you and he's opining on when you should have kids." Rachel pursed her lips. "I actually think he meant well. He's right that having a baby now would complicate things at work. I mean, I brought it up. It's not like he pried unprovoked. I mentioned we were thinking about it eventually. She squeezed my hand now, a placating gesture. Don't worry. I didn't discuss our private life in detail. It was just general. I forced a smile and nodded, though something about it irked me. Perhaps it was a bruise to my ego that this Mr. Keener, Nathan, was giving my wife life advice that countered what we had discussed. Just a few months prior, I'd half-jokingly suggested we think about trying for a baby in the fall. Rachel had playfully swatted me away, saying, maybe soon, but let's see how the new job stuff goes first. Now I realized she'd gotten external validation to postpone that plan. It's ultimately our decision, I said mildly. But yeah, we can wait. We have enough on our plate this year. She looked relieved at my agreement. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. Once this promotion is secure, we'll be in a much better place for a family. And it's not even guaranteed I'll get it, but Mr. Keener hinted I'm a top contender if I keep performing well. That was the first real mention of Nathan Keener, and I can recall it with perfect clarity now. At the time, I only felt a passing annoyance and then let it go. A demanding boss, but one who clearly valued my wife's talent. If anything, I thought he might be a great mentor figure for her. I had no inkling how personal that relationship would become. Over the next few months, Rachel's workload increased exponentially. Late January through March were a blur of long hours for both of us. If I wasn't working overnight in the ER, she was at her office late or attending client dinners. Our time together dwindled further. I started to notice she talked about work and about Nathan with growing frequency. Mr. Keener wants me to lead the budget meeting tomorrow. I'm a little nervous, she'd say a morning over coffee reviewing notes on her tablet, or on a Saturday afternoon. Nathan called me earlier. Yes, on a Saturday. He had an idea for restructuring part of the merger terms and wanted my input before Monday. I'm kind of flattered he looped me in. I teased her once in early March, grinning over the rim of my mug. You mention this guy's name more than mine these days. It was meant as a light joke, and she laughed, swatting my arm gently. Oh, stop. I spend more time with him than with you lately, that's all, she said. Then her face softened, realizing how that sounded. She leaned in and gave me a quick apologetic kiss, which I hate. I miss you, Dan. I really do. This project is just everything right now. I kissed her back and brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. I miss you too, but I know how important it is. We'll have time after, right? The deal closes by early summer, you said? She nodded. By June, if all goes well. Then she smiled brightly. And Nathan promised the whole team a celebration retreat once it's done. Maybe spouses can come. Someplace nice like Napa Valley or Miami Beach on the company's dime. We'll make up for lost time then, okay? Deal, I agreed, envisioning us clinking glasses on a sunny beach as a reward for these rough months. I could live with that. In hindsight, that conversation is like acid in my throat. The idea of going on a celebratory trip hosted by the man who would eventually destroy my marriage is bitterly ironic. But at the time, I truly looked forward to meeting this Nathan Keener properly in a relaxed setting. Rachel spoke highly of him. He was brilliant, charismatic, an industry veteran who had taken her under his wing. She admired him, and I foolishly thought that was simply professional admiration. April 2023 is when I noticed the first undeniable shift in Rachel herself. With spring came a subtle transformation in my wife's habits and appearance. It was nothing dramatic at first, just small changes that, individually, I could easily rationalize, but together, these changes signaled something was off. For one, Rachel started paying a lot more attention to her looks each morning. Now, she was always beautiful, and she'd always dressed nicely for work, but this was different. She bought several new outfits, sharp, tailored suits, blouses a little more elegant than her usual fare. I remember one evening she came home carrying bags from Easton Town Center. She excitedly showed me a silk emerald green blouse and a form-fitting charcoal gray skirt. Wow, I had whistled appreciatively. That's quite the outfit. Big meeting coming up? She twirled playfully, the shopping bag swinging. Possibly. But also I just realized I need to up my wardrobe game. The other VP's executive assistant has been throwing shade at my off-the-rack suits. She rolled her eyes as if it were office politics nonsense. I chuckled. If it makes you happy, go for it. You look amazing, as always. Not that you need fancy clothes for that. She smiled and kissed me, and for a moment it felt like ages since we'd had a moment of light flirtation. You're sweet, but I also kind of love this style. It makes me feel powerful, she joked, flexing an imaginary muscle. Along with the wardrobe, there were changes to her routine. She started waking up extra early to style her hair nicely, rather than the quick ponytail she used to do when rushed. She switched from minimal makeup to a more polished look, subtle but there, a touch of eyeliner, a bolder lip color. She even started wearing a delicate new perfume, something with a hint of jasmine, whereas she usually stuck to her one favorite scent. When I commented on the perfume one morning, she casually mentioned, "Oh, one of the women at work sells those high-end fragrances as a side gig. I thought I'd try something new." It seemed harmless. In fact, I rather liked the fresh scent. More concerning was how protective she became of her phone and her time. By late April, she was glued to her phone more than ever, often texting well into the evening. If I glanced over or asked about it, she'd say, "It's work. We're coordinating tomorrow's presentation," or "One of my team had a question." I had no reason to doubt her, but I did notice she started tilting the screen away from me if I was nearby. A subtle body language shift I barely registered then. Once or twice, I heard the phone vibrate late at night when we were in bed and saw her pick it up to check. "Who is it?" I mumbled sleepily. "Just a work email, go back to sleep," she whispered, pecking my cheek. I didn't push further. We were intimate less frequently, which I mostly attributed to both of us being overworked. There were nights I came home longing just to hold her, to reaffirm our connection, but she'd be passed out, laptop still open on her lap amid spreadsheets. Other times, she would come to bed long after I'd turned in, and I'd wake briefly to her slipping under the covers, smelling of shower gel. She'd taken to showering at odd hours, saying it helped her relax after long days. Our love life wasn't dead, not yet, but it was on pause. We promised each other it was temporary. In fact, one Friday night in May, I arranged a surprise date to try and rekindle things a bit. I managed to swap a shift to get the evening off and made reservations at the Refectory, one of Columbus's nicest restaurants, which Rachel had always wanted to try. When I told her that morning about my plan, she looked genuinely thrilled. "Dinner at the Refectory? How did I get so lucky?" she teased, wrapping her arms around my neck. "You deserve a break," I said, kissing her forehead. "We both do. Tonight it's just us. No work talk, fancy food, and maybe we'll see where the night goes after." I waggled my eyebrows suggestively, earning a real laugh from her that warmed my heart. All day I was in high spirits thinking about our date. I even left the hospital early to get home and change into a suit. But an hour before our reservation, Rachel called. I remember the sinking feeling as soon as I saw her name on my phone, as if I instinctively knew bad news was coming. When I answered, her voice was strained. "Dan, I am so sorry," she began. "I'm stuck at work. Nathan and the rest of us are finalizing a crucial budget issue that has to go out tonight for the board review. I don't think I can make our dinner on time." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. I was disappointed, but tried to sound understanding. "How long do you think it'll take? We have a 7 p.m. reservation. I could move it to 8. She sighed heavily. In the background, I could hear muffled voices and the clack of a keyboard. "It might be another 2 or 3 hours, honestly. This came out of nowhere. He's here with us too, pushing to get it done." She didn't need to clarify who he was. I felt a flash of anger, whether at her or at Nathan Keener or the situation, I wasn't sure. But snapping at her wouldn't help. "All right," I said after a pause. "We'll reschedule. It's okay." "I'm really sorry," she repeated, her voice small. "I was looking forward to tonight." "Me too," I admitted quietly. There was a silence on the line filled with things neither of us said. Finally, I mustered a lighter tone. "Don't work too late. I'll save you some dessert from the fridge." She chuckled softly. "You're too good to me. I'll make it up to you, I promise." "Love you." "I love you," I responded, but the call had already clicked off. I stood there in our living room, dressed in a suit with nowhere to go, feeling foolish and alone. That was the first night I felt something akin to real doubt about us. Not because she canceled. Work happens, I knew that well. But because of how easily it seemed he had claimed priority over our personal time. It stung. I ended up going to the refectory by myself, if only to avoid wasting the reservation. I sat at a small table in the corner picking at a roasted duck breast and sipping a glass of Merlot, chewing over my worries as much as my food. Surrounded by low conversation and clinking silverware of other couples on romantic evenings, I felt like an outsider peering in at a world I used to inhabit. It occurred to me in that dim restaurant that I couldn't recall the last time Rachel and I had a proper romantic night together. Weeks, months maybe. And whose fault was that? Both of ours, probably. But something in my gut whispered that it wasn't just the workload keeping her away. I tried to quell the ugly, unjustified suspicion forming in my mind. Rachel would never cheat? I nearly laughed at the thought. We loved each other. We'd been through thick and thin since college. She wasn't the type, and neither was I. We were solid. I told myself that repeatedly. If only I'd known how wrong I was. If only I'd known that the affair had already begun to spark to life, subtle and hidden, like a slow-burning ember beneath ash. The Unraveling. May 17th, 2023. I'll never forget the date, because that was the day everything unraveled. The day I caught them. And it happened in the most mundane of places, the parking lot of a Kroger supermarket on the north side of Columbus. It was a Wednesday, my day off after a 7-day rotation of hospital shifts. I remember it was unseasonably hot for May, the afternoon air sticky with humidity as if summer had arrived early. I had spent most of the morning tackling errands we'd been neglecting. Mowing the lawn, picking up a package from the post office, dropping off dry cleaning. Normal, boring stuff that felt almost calming given the frenetic pace of life lately. Rachel was at work, or so I thought. She had left that morning in her usual tailored navy pantsuit, giving me a distracted peck on the lips on her way out around 8 a.m. "Good luck surviving your day of domesticity," she teased lightly, noting my to-do list stuck to the fridge. "Don't have too much fun without me," I smirked, leaning against the doorframe. "I'll try to contain myself. Maybe I'll even dust," I shot back, earning a grin from her. "Dinner tonight? I can cook since I'm off." Her phone buzzed just then, and she glanced at it with a fleeting frown. "I'll, I might be late. We have a conference call with some West Coast investors at 5, so don't wait on me. I'll grab something at work if it runs over." I tried not to let my disappointment show. "All right, be safe. Love you. Love you too." She tossed over her shoulder, already focused on her phone as she walked to her car. So she was supposed to be at the office all day and into the evening. That detail is important because it's what made what I saw later so jarring. Sometime after lunch, I decided to make a grocery run. Our fridge was woefully empty, aside from a couple of leftover takeout containers and an old carton of milk. Plus, I thought maybe I could still whip up a late dinner for us to share whenever she got back. Optimism dies hard. I headed to the Kroger on North High Street around 2 p.m. I remember checking my phone before getting out of the car. No text from Rachel, no updates. Fine. List in hand, I spent a good half hour wandering the cool aisles of the grocery store, filling my cart with staples, fresh vegetables, chicken breasts, pasta, a nice bottle of Pinot Noir that caught my eye. I think I subconsciously still hoped we might salvage a nice evening together. As I exited the store with my bags, the harsh afternoon sun made me squint. I walked across the busy parking lot, weaving between parked cars toward where I'd left my old silver Honda Accord. I had nearly reached my car when something, or rather someone, caught my eye a few rows over. There was a black BMW sedan parked under the shade of a large maple tree by the edge of the lot. I might not have paid any attention, except I noticed two people standing very close to each other beside it. The woman's back was partly turned to me. The man leaned against the driver's side door facing her. It was a subtly intimate stance. You know it when you see it. It wasn't a casual chat between friends or colleagues. I slowed my pace instinctively, curiosity piqued. The woman's figure looked familiar, even from behind. She wore a gray pencil skirt and a sleeveless white blouse, the kind of professional outfit I'd seen on my wife that very morning. Her chestnut hair was unmistakable, catching a glint of coppery highlight in the sun. A strange chill prickled at the back of my neck. That can't be, I thought, heart thumping suddenly in my chest. Rachel was at work, downtown, and yet the woman laughing softly in front of that BMW, shifting her weight from one foot to another in a flirtatious sway. She looked exactly like Rachel. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me behind the shelter of a big red pickup truck one row over from the BMW. I abandoned my grocery cart right there, bags and all, not even fully aware of it. Every nerve in my body was electric with adrenaline and dread as I peered around the truck's tailgate. The man with her was tall, a bit older than us, maybe mid-40s, with silvering brown hair. He wore a crisp light blue dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, and charcoal slacks. He had that polished executive look, fit and confident. His hand rested casually on the small of her back as they talked, and I saw Rachel, yes, it was undeniably Rachel, tilt her face up to him, smiling in a way that made my stomach lurch. Even from 30 feet away, I recognized that expression on her face. I had seen it countless times directed at me, warm, playful affection. The kind of look you give someone who lights you up inside. Except this time, it was meant for someone else. I felt frozen in place, gripping the side of the truck for support. My rational brain was scrambling for explanations, trying to deny what was unfolding in front of me. Maybe she was meeting a coworker here for a quick break? Perhaps a lunch meeting that ran long? But then why the body language? Why the touching? As I watched, they moved closer together. The man said something and Rachel laughed. I could even hear the faint sound of it across the lot. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an iron fist. Then it happened. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, then leaned in to press his lips to hers. I flinched as though I'd been struck. The shock of it sent my mind reeling. One heartbeat, two heartbeats. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a chaste peck between friends. I saw Rachel respond, her body melting against him as he deepened the kiss. Her hands slid up his chest, lingering there intimately. A roaring filled my ears, my vision blurred at the edges. I realized I had balled my hands into fists so tightly that my nails bit into my palms. They were kissing. My wife was kissing another man in broad daylight in a grocery store parking lot where anyone could see. Where I could see. For a second, I honestly wondered if I was hallucinating. Maybe I'd been working too hard. Maybe this was some exhaustion-fueled mirage. But no. Every detail was sharp. The way her body curved into him. The familiarity with which he held her. The contented little smile on her lips when they finally parted. I felt sick. They were speaking to each other in low tones now. I inched slightly closer, staying crouched behind the truck. My entire body was trembling. Part of me wanted to storm over and rip them apart, demand answers, hit the guy. God, I wanted to break his jaw for touching her. But another part of me, colder and perhaps wiser, hissed, "Wait, watch." Something told me not to blow up, not yet. As they chatted, I caught snippets of conversation on the breeze. "So glad you slipped away," the man was saying, his voice smooth, with a confident lilt. Rachel chuckled. "I told them I had a dentist appointment. Perks of being the boss's favorite, huh?" He grinned, teeth white. "Favorite for many reasons." His hand gave her waist a squeeze. She swatted him lightly on the arm. "Careful, mister." "Keener," she teased. Keener. The name hit me like a slap. Nathan Keener. There was no doubt now. I was staring at Rachel and her famed boss, the VP she'd admired and worked under these past months. The mental image I'd built of Nathan from her descriptions, a respected mentor figure, maybe a touch fatherly, shattered instantly. The reality was a man her senior who clearly knew exactly what he was doing, seducing a younger, married subordinate. Nathan opened the driver's door. "Come on, let's not linger out here. We only have an hour or so." He flashed her a conspiratorial wink. She glanced around quickly, perhaps checking if they'd been seen, though ironically she didn't spot me. She looked a little nervous now that the kiss was done. "Where are we going?" "We'll barely get to Easton and back in an hour," she said, referring to the upscale shopping district nearby. For one absurd moment I thought, Easton? Are they going shopping together? But then Nathan nodded towards somewhere behind the store. "There's that business hotel just across the street," he murmured, keeping his voice low, but I heard it as if he'd shouted. "I booked a room earlier. Figured we could use some privacy instead of my car." His tone was meaningful. I felt a bile rise in my throat. They weren't sneaking off for a lunch or shopping. They had a hotel room in the middle of the day. On a day she told me she'd be working late, of course. My knees nearly buckled with the realization of just how planned and deliberate this was. Rachel bit her lip, a habit of hers when she was excited or nervous. "Oh, you're something else," she whispered, but I could hear the flirtatious excitement in her voice. "A hotel, huh? This feels so naughty." He chuckled, a deep sound that made my skin crawl. I promise to make it worth your while." Then he leaned in and kissed her again, more briefly, and I saw his hand slip lower, brazenly cupping her rear through that tight skirt. She made a delighted little squeak and swatted him again in faux protest. "Behave," she scolded lightly, but started to walk around to the passenger side of his BMW. In that moment, I realized they were about to leave together. If I didn't do something, they would disappear into that hotel, and I wouldn't have proof beyond my own eyes of what I'd seen. Some logical part of me kicked in. I needed evidence. I couldn't confront them with nothing but my word versus theirs. They might deny, gaslight me, and a primal part of me wanted, no, needed, to have tangible proof of this betrayal. Proof I wasn't crazy. Hand shaking, I fumbled my phone out of my pocket. Thank God for modern technology. My phone's camera was good and I had a clear line of sight. As she opened the passenger door and he stood by the driver's side, I snapped several photos. Rachel's face visible as she glanced at him, their bodies next to each other, the license plate of the BMW. In one shot, Nathan's hand was on her lower back again as she ducked into the car. Click. Another captured his face in profile as he looked around again before getting in himself. Click. He didn't spot me. I was partially shielded by the truck and a hedge. I recorded a short, shaky video too, though at that distance the audio might not be clear. At least the footage showed them kissing by the car, then entering it together. My heart was pounding so fiercely I thought I might faint. But I forced myself to keep steady until I saw the BMW's engine start and the car pull out of the parking spot. As Nathan's car rolled past me, I crouched down quickly behind the truck, holding my breath. I caught one more glimpse of Rachel in the front seat, her phone in hand as she laughed at something he said. Then they exited the lot, heading across the street. I stood up, watching the black sedan turn into the entrance of the small Woodbury Inn across from the Kroger, a business-class hotel mostly used by traveling salespeople. It was almost painfully cliche. For a moment, I just stood there in the middle of the parking lot, utterly numb. My shopping bags were still sitting abandoned in the cart by the pickup. A carton of eggs had fallen out and cracked on the asphalt, yolk spreading slowly in the heat. Surreal, the trivial detail of that broken egg while my marriage lay broken next to it. I don't know how long I remained frozen, but a car horn somewhere jolted me back to my senses. A fierce tide of emotion threatened to swamp me. Rage, sorrow, disgust, heartbreak all rolled into one. My immediate impulse was to drive straight over to that hotel, burst into whatever room they'd rented, and catch them in the act. But another voice in my head, maybe the doctor in me accustomed to high-pressure decisions, told me to stop and think. Be methodical. Be strategic. The phrase repeated in my mind like a mantra. If I confronted them now in a blind fury, I might do something stupid, illegal even, and then I'd be the one in trouble. No, I needed to approach this carefully. They had no idea I knew. That ignorance was leverage. I clung to that thought like a lifeline. I had the upper hand of surprise. I could use it. Moving on autopilot, I gathered my scattered groceries. My appetite was gone, but I numbly collected the bags and loaded them into my car's trunk. I drove home somehow, mind racing, but also weirdly clear, as if part of me detached to handle the immediate tasks, while another part deep inside began to crack apart from pain. Back at the house, I put the perishables in the fridge without even really seeing what I was doing. Then I sat at the kitchen table and forced myself to review the photos and video on my phone. My hands trembled as I played back the video. The quality was decent. You could clearly see Rachel's face and Nathan's as they kissed and got into his car. The photos were even better, one showing Rachel looking up at him with a smile I knew intimately. A smile she hadn't given me in months, I realized bitterly. That's when the first wave of anguish hit. There was no denying it now. The woman I loved, my wife, was cheating on me brazenly. And not just with anyone, but with her boss, a man I had heard so much about. All those late nights, those business dinners, those weekend work emails, it crashed over me that many of those might have been lies or covers. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? The thought that they might have been intimate for some time, that she came home to me after being with him, made me want to scream or vomit or both. I felt my vision blur with hot tears. I slammed my fist down on the table, a strangled sound escaping my throat. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely process it. But after a moment, another emotion began to steel itself over the pain. Cold, seething anger. Not the initial volcanic explosion of fury, no. This was something else. a calculating, resolute wrath that started to whisper to me, "They have no idea what they've just unleashed." I'm not a violent man by nature. As a doctor, my impulse is always to help, to heal. But at that moment, I understood in a very real way how crimes of passion happen. I understood how someone could kill in a white-hot flash of hurt, because the images of them kept replaying in my mind, and each time they did, I had to fight off an impulse to grab the nearest object and break it. Instead, I forced myself to breathe slowly. I wiped my eyes. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, I needed to act. Rachel wasn't due home for hours, presumably. In reality, she'd likely spend another hour or so at that hotel, then return to the office to maintain appearances of a normal workday, and come home around her usual time or slightly later, claiming that conference call ran long. She would walk in, perhaps a bit flushed from her illicit afternoon, and greet me with a kiss as if nothing was wrong. The thought made my skin crawl and my anger swell further. No, I wouldn't confront her tonight. I needed a plan first, a way to ensure that when I confronted her, and him, the consequences would be absolute and irrevocable. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I was going to destroy both of them. Methodically, strategically, brutally. They had taken my entire world and set it on fire. I was going to return the favor times 10. I knew I had to be smart about it. Nathan Keener was a powerful man in her company, and by extension, in our city's business community. He likely had resources, connections, and a reputation to protect. Rachel, for her part, was savvy and strong-willed. If I confronted her with nothing but accusations, she might attempt to lie or spin it. But she couldn't lie her way out of photographic evidence. That I already had, and I was determined to gather even more ammunition before I lowered the boom. Sitting at the kitchen table in that empty house, I started making a list of everything I needed to do. It felt eerily similar to the way I'd approach a complex case in the ER. Assess the situation, gather data, call in specialists as needed, execute a treatment plan. 1. Secure evidence of the affair. I had a start, photos and a video, but maybe I could get more. If this wasn't their first rendezvous, they might have a pattern. Perhaps messages or emails if I could get access. I realized I had something potentially useful. Rachel's personal laptop was often left at home when she didn't need it for work. She had separate work devices that I wouldn't have access to, but her phone. I recalled that we had the family phone plan with Verizon, and I was the primary account holder. I could potentially retrieve phone records, at least logs of calls and texts, not content, but timestamps and numbers. That might reveal suspiciously frequent contact with one number, likely Nathan's. Also, we use the same home Wi-Fi, and sometimes devices might be synced. She had an iPad she left at home often. If her messages were linked to it via iCloud, I might find something. 2. Secure our finances and legal position. I didn't know if Rachel would suspect I'd found out. I doubted it, unless my abandoned groceries were somehow a clue, but she wouldn't know about that. I had to assume she'd carry on normally for now. That gave me some time to act unilaterally. We had a joint checking and savings account and separate retirement accounts. No kids, thank God, and no pets beyond a goldfish. The house mortgage was in both names. I needed to think ahead to divorce because there was absolutely no question I was divorcing her. Ohio was a no-fault state for divorce, but I could still file on grounds of adultery if I wanted it on record. Even if it might not affect asset division by law, it could help in negotiations if she wanted to avoid scandal. I decided I would quietly move half of our readily available joint savings into an account solely in my name so she couldn't drain it if things turned ugly. That wasn't illegal. It was marital funds, and I'd only take what's fair to protect it. I also made a mental note to freeze or change online passwords for any financial accounts so she couldn't hide or transfer assets without me knowing. We both earned good incomes, though mine was slightly higher thanks to extra hospital shifts. Spousal support wouldn't likely be a huge factor as we were both employed. But I was damned if I'd pay a cent of alimony to a cheating spouse if I could help it. If she got fired due to what I was about to unleash, she might attempt to get support. I'd have to ensure adultery, while maybe not punitive in property division by the court, would make her too ashamed to try that. Or I'd leverage something to block. 3. Professional fallout. This one made me almost grimly smile through the pain. Nathan Keener was her lover and also her superior at work. Their company, Midland, surely had policies about relationships between management and employees, especially if one was in the other's chain of command. At minimum, it's a serious HR issue. At worst, grounds for termination for both, definitely for him. If I could expose their affair to his higher-ups or HR, I might bring them both down professionally. She valued her career so highly. Imagine her being walked out in disgrace. And him, Mr. High-Flying VP, toppling from his perch. But I needed to be careful and strategic in how to expose it. If I just sent anonymous info, they might try to deny or muddy it. The evidence had to be undeniable. Photos, maybe even testimonies. I wondered if anyone at work already suspected them. Often office affairs leak in whispers. Perhaps one of her colleagues had seen something. That could be a lead. Maybe I could find an ally, or at least someone who could confirm details like trips or late nights that didn't add up. 4. Legal maneuvers beyond divorce. The thought crossed my mind, was there any legal action I could take against him directly? Alienation of affection lawsuits are mostly abolished, I recalled, and a quick verification online confirmed Ohio doesn't allow them. So probably not directly for the affair itself. But what about other things? If he or they had done anything illegal in the course of their relationship or at work, like misusing company funds to fund rendezvous, or he pressured her in some unethical way, that could be leverage. Or if they used company email phones for their trysts, that might violate company policy. I realized Nathan might have his own Achilles heel. Men like him often do. If he was willing to risk his job having an affair with a subordinate, maybe he had other secrets. Could I find any dirt on him? Perhaps hiring a private investigator to dig into his background was in order. It gave me a dark satisfaction to imagine uncovering some financial fraud or past harassment case that I could anonymously forward to the authorities or media. Which led to another avenue, contacts and allies. I didn't want to confide in too many people yet. The humiliation was still too raw. But I did have resources. One of my closest friends was Detective Adam Collins with the Columbus Police Department. We'd gone to high school together and stayed in touch. If I needed advice on any borderline illegal things or an inside track, he might help. I wasn't going to show up and ask him to break the law, but he could run a license plate or a background check if I asked casually. The license plate of Nathan's BMW, for instance, I had it in a photo. Adam could get me address info, though likely I could find that through other means. I also knew a lawyer socially, Marjorie Hall, who was a patient of mine once and had said if I ever needed legal help to call. She specialized in family law. She might be invaluable for divorce strategy. I could set up a meeting covertly. And then there was the thought of contacting Nathan's wife, if he had one. Rachel had mentioned he was divorced or widowed. Actually, she hadn't said much about his personal life. In reference, she often said Mr. Keener or Nathan, but never mentioned a Mrs. Keener. I needed to find out. If he was married? Oh boy. If he was, I absolutely intended to inform his wife of everything. She deserved to know, and it would ensure he lost everything at home too. So find out if Nathan Keener has a spouse or long-term partner. 5. Emotional warfare. This one was more abstract, but just as important to me in that moment. I wanted them to suffer. Not just lose jobs or money, but truly regret and hurt. For Rachel, I knew her weak points. She feared public embarrassment. She prided herself on her reputation as a smart, successful professional and a good person. Exposing her infidelity to her family and friends would devastate her. I thought of her parents. Extremely traditional folks in Cincinnati who loved me like a son and thought the world of our marriage. If they found out what she did, I doubt they'd be sympathetic to her. There was also shame at work. If colleagues learned she'd slept her way to a promotion, that's how they'd see it once out. It'd tarnish her accomplishments irreparably. For Nathan, likely similar. If he was respected in his field, a scandal could ruin networking and future prospects. If he had a wife or ex-wife with any hold over his assets, a revelation could cost him dearly. I had to, however, be mindful of timing. These kinds of reveals could not be undone. Once I dropped the bomb, my marriage would be truly over, not that it wasn't now in my heart, but practically. I needed to have my legal and financial protections in place first. I also didn't want to do anything that could backfire legally on me. For example, physically assaulting Nathan, no matter how tempting, could land me in jail and ironically make me the bad guy in the eyes of the law, overshadowing their wrongdoing. So I resolved then. No physical violence unless absolutely in self-defense. My revenge needed to be delivered in ways that kept me out of orange jumpsuits. However, there was room for some creative illegalities if I was careful. For instance, snooping in her devices or accounts is technically a gray area. But as her husband, I can possibly access shared resources. Hacking his email would be illegal, though. That's where a PI or someone skilled might come in, giving me plausible deniability. I sat there, scribbling these notes on a notepad for I don't know how long. It gave me a sense of control, however small, to outline a plan. I was still in that spot when, at around 5:30 p.m., I heard the familiar creak of the front door opening. I startled. I didn't expect her home until later. Quickly, I flipped the notepad face down and slid it under a magazine, then grabbed the nearest thing, my phone, to feign casualness. "Dan? You home?" came Rachel's voice. She sounded cheerful. I had a fleeting image of her in that hotel room an hour ago, and had to clench my jaw tightly to not let fury surge. I strode out to the living room. There she was, kicking off her heels by the entryway, looking a bit flushed in the cheeks but otherwise put together. She had reapplied lipstick, I noticed, a shade of soft rose that I knew well. Was it smudged earlier from kissing him? The thought set my teeth on edge. "You're back early," I managed, forcing an easy tone. Years of dealing with crises in the ER had honed my acting skills. I could sound calm even when an artery was spraying blood. I summoned that ability now. "Early? It's almost 6, she laughed lightly. "The conference call ended sooner than expected, so I figured I'd come home and surprise you." She stepped forward and gave me a warm hug, wrapping her arms around my waist. I willed myself not to flinch or push her away. The scent of jasmine perfume and something else, a musk that wasn't hers, hit my nose. I wondered if it was him I smelled on her. My stomach churned, but I stroked her back lightly as if nothing were wrong. "That's great," I murmured, my voice betraying nothing. "I was actually going to start dinner soon. I picked up groceries this afternoon." She pulled back and smiled up at me, looking genuinely pleased. "A home-cooked dinner? Now that is a treat. And here I was expecting to come home to you exhausted on the couch." She peered around theatrically. "A house looks clean too. You've been productive." I shrugged modestly. Figured I should make myself useful on my day off. She leaned in and gave me a quick, soft kiss on the lips. I fought the urge to recoil. Instead, I let her, even kissed her back lightly. Inside, I felt sick at the intimacy knowing where her mouth had been not long ago, but I had to maintain the facade. "I need to change out of this," she said, gesturing at her blouse and skirt. "I've been in these clothes all day." There was an odd emphasis in her tone, almost a hint of giddiness she was concealing. She breezed past me toward the hallway that led to our bedroom, and I watched her go. Only when she was out of sight did I let my expression collapse into a mixture of anger and pain. I stood there, fists clenched, forcing myself to breathe slowly until I could put the mask back on. While she changed, I busied myself in the kitchen marinating chicken and chopping vegetables. The motions felt distant, automatic. I could hear the shower turn on. She was likely washing off the sweat and evidence of her infidelity. It dawned on me that she probably wanted to make love tonight, as a smokescreen or out of residual excitement. The thought was abhorrent and infuriating. I swiftly decided I would play tired to avoid any such scenario. Thankfully, exhaustion was easy to fake given our schedules. When she emerged again, dressed in casual yoga pants and a tank top, hair damp from a quick shower, I had things simmering on the stove. She came up and hugged me from behind, resting her cheek between my shoulder blades. Smells amazing," she murmured. "What would I do without you?" "You'd screw your boss in a motel at 2 p.m. and then eat alone," I thought viciously. But outwardly, I chuckled. "Probably starve," I joked. We ate dinner together, discussing the mundane events of our day. At least, I had to pretend to. I offered some story about a crazy patient case from the day before, which was true, just not from today, to fill space. She in turn recapped her fake conference call and some made-up issues at work. I watched her lie to my face so smoothly, talking about being in the office, about a chat with her colleague Melissa in accounting, about how everyone's gearing up for the final merger announcement next week. She was such an effortless liar. It was chilling. If I didn't know the truth, nothing in her demeanor would have tipped me off. In fact, she was more relaxed and upbeat than she'd been in some time, likely because she'd gotten her afternoon thrill. It made me sick to realize I might have been misinterpreting her improved mood lately as simply work success or stress relief, when it was him fulfilling her needs behind my back. I kept up my end of the conversation, even managing smiles and a few laughs. Inside, every word from her mouth felt like another needle under my skin. But I endured it, fueling my resolve with each deception she uttered. After dinner, she insisted on curling up on the couch together to watch one of our favorite TV shows, some crime drama we followed. We sat there, her cuddled into my side, my arm around her. It took every ounce of control not to tense up or recoil when she nuzzled into my neck. I felt like I was observing someone else's life from the outside. She must have interpreted my stiffness as lingering exhaustion because around 10 p.m. she yawned and said, "You seem beat. Let's go to bed. You need rest." I nodded gratefully at the suggestion. As much as I dreaded sharing a bed with her now, I preferred that over dealing with any sexual expectations. True to my plan, when we got into bed, I gave her a soft kiss goodnight and rolled over, feigning near-instant sleepiness. Within minutes, I could hear her breathing deepen as she fell asleep, likely content and unsuspecting. I, however, lay awake for hours, mind churning with plans for the reckoning to come. Listening to the soft rhythm of her breath, I felt a confusing mix of heartbreak and hatred. But above all, I felt a grim determination. The two people sleeping together at that motel had no idea that a storm was coming for them. They thought they were clever, that they'd get away with betraying and humiliating me. They were wrong. I would make sure they paid for it all, legally, professionally, personally. And I would not stop until both Rachel and Nathan were utterly ruined. Lying in the darkness next to the woman I once thought I'd love forever, I silently vowed, "Enjoy your dreams tonight, Rachel, because soon I'm going to turn your world into a nightmare." Laying the trap. The next morning, I awoke to the alarm at 6:30 a.m. after what felt like only a couple hours of fitful dozing. My mind had finally shut down out of sheer exhaustion sometime after 3 a.m. Despite the fatigue, as soon as consciousness returned, so did the grim purpose fueling me. I turned off the alarm and carefully slipped out of bed, not wanting to wake Rachel. She murmured something in her sleep but didn't stir. Standing there for a moment, I looked at her sleeping form, her face peaceful, lips slightly parted. It hit me then how much a stranger she now felt. I realized I didn't even know this woman, not truly, if she was capable of what she was doing. The urge to yank the covers off and confront her with her lies surged, but I quelled it. Not yet. Stick to the plan. I quietly went to the kitchen to brew coffee and prepare for the day. I had to head back to the hospital for my shift at 8, but I had some time to initiate a few steps of my plan first. As I sipped my coffee, I logged into our Verizon account on my laptop. Sure enough, as the primary, I could access call and SMS logs for both our phone lines. I navigated to Rachel's usage details and felt a twist of anger as the page loaded an extensive list of calls and texts. Sorting by phone number, I quickly identified a recurring number that appeared at odd hours. A 312 area code, Chicago, likely Nathan's cell. There were dozens of messages each day back and forth and frequent calls, early morning, late night, even during weekends. They ramped up significantly in the last 2 months. That corresponded with when she'd started talking more about him. It looked like the affair was likely in full swing for at least a couple of months, possibly longer, if earlier communication was through work channels. I downloaded the logs as a spreadsheet for safekeeping. The content of texts wasn't visible, of course, but timing and volume told a story on its own. It wouldn't be hard to argue the nature of those communications when combined with other evidence. Next, I needed more direct evidence of their exchanges. If they had been careless, maybe she saved his number under a pseudonym or something in her phone's contacts. Or maybe they emailed. She had a personal Gmail account that I knew the address of, and likely a work email, though I had no access to that. Perhaps they used personal emails to avoid IT monitoring. If I could get into her laptop or iPad, maybe she was logged into her email or messaging apps. I remembered the iPad. Rachel had a habit of leaving it in the living room side table drawer. She mostly used it for reading ebooks. There was a chance her iMessages were synced to it, if she had that feature on. I quietly fetched the iPad from the drawer. It was locked, but I knew her passcode, a derivative of our anniversary date. My heart pounded as I tapped it in. Thankfully, she hadn't changed it. The device unlocked. I navigated to the Messages app and my suspicions were immediately validated. There was a message thread with someone labeled N. The preview of the last message from yesterday evening read, N. Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. I had to take a slow breath as rage flared. She'd been texting him even after coming home to me. And the gall to not even hide the initial of his name? Perhaps she assumed I'd never snoop, or that if I did, N could be anyone. I clicked the thread. A whole series of messages popped up, and scanning them left me seething. N. Yesterday, 5:10 p.m. Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. You were incredible. Rachel, 5:12 p.m. I wish we'd had more time. You have me all energized. N. 5:15 p.m. God, same here. Seeing you sneak back into work with that flush. So sexy knowing I caused it. Rachel, 5:20 p.m. Behave. LOL. I hope nobody noticed I was gone. N. 5:21 p.m. They didn't. Everyone left me alone to review numbers. We're in the clear. N. 5:22 p.m. When's our next meeting? I need you. Rachel, 5:25 p.m. Soon, I promise. Maybe I can have a doctor's appointment next week. N. 5:27 p.m. Doctor, Carter might get suspicious if his wife has too many appointments. Rachel, 5:30 p.m. Don't worry about Dan. He's been so busy he doesn't suspect a thing. Rachel, 5:31 p.m. He actually planned a nice dinner tonight at home. Guilt trip much? N. 5:33 p.m. Uh-oh, guilty conscience? Rachel, 5:35 p.m. Maybe a little. He's a good man, I hate deceiving him. But I can't stop. N. 5:37 p.m. Nor can I. No guilt when we're together. Rachel, 5:40 p.m. True. With you I feel alive. Like I earned this excitement after being the boring wife for so long. N. 5:42 p.m. You're anything but boring. He doesn't know how lucky he was. Emphasis on was. Rachel, 5:45 p.m. We shouldn't talk like that, not yet. N. 5:47 p.m. All right. One day at a time. Enjoy your dinner. I'll be thinking about you, especially in that green lace set. Rachel, 5:50 p.m. You are bad. Bye, Nathan. N. 5:51 p.m. Bye, gorgeous. Reading those messages was like being stabbed with a rusty knife slowly. My hands shook, but I forced myself to calmly take screenshots of the entire conversation thread, scrolling up as far as I could go. The history on the iPad seemed limited to the last few days, perhaps because she didn't use iMessage much on it, or older messages hadn't synced, but this alone was plenty. There was no ambiguity now. They were clearly lovers, planning future trysts, acknowledging deceiving me, even referencing lingerie, the green lace set, that I now realized was a new purchase she explained away as a Victoria's Secret sale item a few weeks back. And the line, he doesn't know how lucky he was, emphasis on was Nathan implying that I was lucky, past tense, implying she's as good as gone from me. And she cautioned him not yet to talk like that. So what? Were they planning a future together? Was she contemplating leaving me eventually? A red haze clouded my vision for a second. The sheer disrespect in these exchanges. It took immense effort not to storm into the bedroom and drag her out of bed by her hair to confront her. But I swallowed that urge down like poison. The time for confrontation would come, and when it did, I wanted it to be devastatingly effective, not an emotional outburst she could dismiss as me being angry but powerless. I forwarded those screenshots to my own email, taking care to delete the sent mail trace on her iPad. I also forwarded them to a newly made anonymous Gmail I'd set up on my phone just then, which I intended to use for any covert communications. Next, I checked her Gmail app on the iPad. It was logged in. Scanning her emails most seemed innocuous or work-related. But I typed Keener in the search and hit enter. A few messages popped up, including some calendar invites from his work address and one personal email from a throwaway account. Nate O. Lover Yahoo. Good grief. The personal email was dated 2 weeks ago, Subject line, Monday, Akkarks can't wait. I opened it. It was short but explicit, describing what he planned to do with her at some upcoming rendezvous, in rather pornographic terms. My lip curled in disgust, but I took a screenshot of that too. I noticed her replies weren't there. Maybe she deleted sent mails or used another account for replying. Regardless, it was more evidence. My blood felt like ice in my veins as I methodically gathered this trove of betrayal. Each piece hurt terribly, but it also solidified my resolve. There would be no second-guessing or weakness in me after seeing these. The woman in those texts was not one I recognized as the wife I loved. She was a lying, cruel stranger. I carefully closed the apps and put the iPad back in its drawer, making sure nothing looked disturbed. Then I went to get ready for work. As I was getting dressed, Rachel wandered into the kitchen in her robe, yawning. "Morning," she mumbled, giving me a sleepy smile. "Morning," I replied, forcing a casual tone as I buttoned my shirt. "Coffee's fresh." She poured herself a mug and leaned on the counter. "You're up early. I thought you started at 8 today?" "Yeah, I have a couple notes to write before rounds, so figured I'd go in a bit early," I lied smoothly. In truth, I wanted some time at work to contact people and make arrangements out of her earshot. She nodded. "I might leave a little early, too. Big day ahead. We're finalizing the merger details for Friday's announcement." I almost smirked at how easily she lied about her day's importance, when I had literal evidence of her planning presumably another meetup soon. Doctor's appointment. Next week. But I simply said, "Good luck. You're off around 6 again?" "Hopefully," she replied. "Maybe we could go out to dinner tomorrow if things are calm. We haven't gone to Marcella's in ages." She named an Italian place we used to frequent. The audacity. She's trying to keep up a normal front, even suggesting a date, likely to alleviate her guilt or suspicion. The sheer two-faced nature made me want to laugh darkly. "Sure, sounds nice," I said. In my head, I was already thinking tomorrow, or the next day, might be when I pull the trigger on some part of my plan. We went through our typical motions, a quick peck goodbye, love you, have a great day exchanges. It was surreal, like I was acting in a play and reading lines that no longer held meaning. The moment I got in my car and pulled away, I allowed my face to twist into an expression of anger and contempt. I pounded the steering wheel once, hard, to vent. Then I took a deep breath and drove to the hospital. Between seeing patients that morning, I contacted a few key people discreetly. First, I sent a text to my lawyer acquaintance, Marjorie Hall, asking if she could recommend a top divorce attorney. I deliberately did not want to use Marjorie herself because she was more a friend, and I needed someone truly ruthless and somewhat detached. She replied promptly with a name. Eleanor Strauss, apparently one of the best and toughest family law attorneys in Columbus, known for handling high-asset, messy divorces. That sounded perfect. I called Eleanor's office, left a message that I wanted a consultation regarding an urgent matter, and was referred by Hall. Within an hour, I got a call back from Eleanor herself, and we set an appointment for the next day at 7 a.m. She was that accommodating, likely sensing a lucrative case. I hinted at adultery and a complex situation. She assured me we'd discuss strategies confidentially. Second, I rang up my detective friend Adam on my personal cell during a break. I kept it light, saying I was curious about someone who might have a history in Chicago, and could he run a quick check or find any public info? Adam laughed and asked if I was dating someone. He was unaware of any marital strife, of course. I told him actually, I had suspicions about a person interacting with my wife, a gut feeling that the guy might be trouble, and I just wanted peace of mind. Adam kindly agreed to see what he could find by that evening. Third, I called a private investigator firm around noon, one I found via careful search, ensuring they had good reviews for discreet infidelity investigations. I set up a preliminary meeting for that evening after work. I intended to have them gather further evidence if needed, perhaps follow Rachel or Nathan on their next rendezvous to get photographs, as well as possibly dig into Nathan's life quietly. During lunch, I also drafted an anonymous email from the new Gmail account to Midland Life and Casualty's HR department head, found on their website. I didn't send it yet, but I composed something along the lines of, "It has come to light that Vice President Nathan Keener has been engaging in an inappropriate sexual relationship with a direct subordinate, Rachel, maiden name Carter, in violation of company policy. Evidence, including time-stamped photographs and message transcripts, exist. Upper management may wish to investigate before this becomes a public scandal or legal issue. I plan to send such a note at the right time, possibly with an attachment of some evidence to ensure it was taken seriously. I also considered sending the evidence to their CEO or board, but HR was a good formal channel to start within the company. Perhaps CCing the CEO anonymously might scare them more, still deciding. However, I would not send this until I was ready to go nuclear, because once it was sent, she'd likely get confronted and know. By mid-afternoon, I felt I had accomplished a lot in laying the groundwork. That's when Detective Adam called me back on my cell. I stepped into an empty corridor to take it. "Hey, Dan," he said. His tone was that of someone delivering bad news or concern. "So I looked into that fella you asked about, Nathan Keener. You got a minute?" "Absolutely," I said, heart thumping. "What'd you find?" "Well, nothing criminal on record if that's what you're worried about," Adam said. "No arrest history that I can find. Squeaky clean legally. But I made a few calls to a buddy in Chicago PD since you mentioned Chicago area code. He knows the name. Keener used to work at some big finance firm there. Word is he was involved in a personal scandal a few years back, an affair with a colleague's wife. That one apparently ended with a confrontation, but no charges. And separate from that, my buddy said there were rumors at his old company of sexual harassment complaints, but they disappeared. Possibly settlements. I felt a surge of vindication. The man was a predator by the sounds of it, with a pattern. Did those rumors involve subordinates? Likely. My friend was hazy on details. Just that Keener left Chicago kinda suddenly around that time, which tracks. He's in Columbus now, right? Possibly his move to Columbus was motivated by that. Either the company moved him quietly, or he jumped ship before formal trouble. "That's immensely helpful, Adam," I said, gripping the phone. "So he's got a history of messing around and maybe harassment. Could be useful to know." "Appreciate it, man." "Everything okay, though?" Adam asked gently. "You being cagey. Is this guy messing with your family?" I inhaled. I trusted Adam, but I wasn't ready to spill everything, and I didn't want to officially involve law enforcement. Let's just say he's overstepping boundaries with someone close to me. I wanted to make sure he's not dangerous beyond being an ass, and to have some intel if I confront him. "Be careful, Dan," Adam warned. "Guys like that can be real pieces of work. If you need backup, you call me, okay? Not saying I can bust him for cheating, but I can be there if you meet him, whatever." "Thanks, I'll keep that in mind," I replied. I truly appreciated it. I owe you one. Hanging up, I felt the pieces falling into place. If Nathan had prior harassment claims or affairs, that could blow things wide open at his current company if they learned they hired a liability. And if I could find evidence of that or even contact that colleague's wife he messed with, that could be an interesting ally or source of further dirt. I noted to ask the PI later to maybe probe that Chicago backstory too. At around 4 p.m., an idea hit me regarding immediate financial moves. I quickly hopped onto our joint bank account via the bank's app. Without hesitation, I transferred half of the balance from our savings to my personal account that only I had. I'd explained to my lawyer why. Usually you shouldn't dissipate assets, but I didn't plan to spend it, just secure it. For checking, I left it since that handled bills, but I made sure to disable overdraft from savings now so Shiwar couldn't unknowingly drain savings via checking overdrafts. I also changed the password on that bank account and a couple others that we rarely used, but had logins she might know. If she tried to log in, she might just think the system glitched or her memory was off. Unlikely she'd check today anyway. I got off work a bit early to make it to the meeting with the PI, leaving around 4:30. I texted Rachel a simple, "Hope your day's going well," keeping up appearances. She replied a bit later while I was driving. "Crazy busy, but okay. You?" I gave a short, neutral answer about an interesting case, nothing more. The less she thought I was focused on her, the better. The meeting with the private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Jim Baxter, took place in a small office in Worthington. I laid out the situation succinctly. I suspected my wife of an affair with her boss, and I already had strong evidence. I even showed him a couple of the tamest photos on my phone and described the messages without revealing I had obtained them, possibly questionably. He nodded, not surprised. Probably dime a dozen case for him. "So what do you need from me, Dr. Carter?" he asked. I want the nail in the coffin evidence, the kind that they can't squirm out of or deny. Photographic proof of them together at a hotel or something. Documentation of their meetings, times, maybe even video if possible. Also, information on the guy. Background, anything that can be leverage. I heard he might have a history in Chicago, maybe old complaints. If you have contacts, see what's public or what you can legally obtain. Jim scribbled notes. Understood. Do you have their schedules or likely meetup times? I provided what I knew. They snuck out to a Woodbury Inn yesterday around 2 p.m. I suspect they might use afternoon appointments as cover occasionally. Possibly next week, she'll attempt again. She texted him about a doctor's appointment as a cover. I can try to figure out when she schedules one. She might put it on her work calendar. He agreed to begin surveillance on Nathan first, since tailing him might be easier to see when he leaves work and where he goes. If he picks her up or meets her, we'd catch it. We arranged he'd start tomorrow, discreetly following Nathan from his office if possible. I gave him Nathan's workplace and description and plate number. I also gave him Nathan's home address, which I got from Adam's Info or one of the public records search by his name. Likely a luxury apartment downtown as that was listed. If he lived alone, maybe he'd invite her there sometimes, though it sounded like they used hotels for now. Jim said he'd also run a comprehensive background check, though any hidden stuff might not show if sealed, but he had contacts too. It would cost me a decent sum, but I didn't care. This was war. By the time I left the PI's office, it was nearly 6:30. I checked my phone and saw a text from Rachel. Home. Exhausted. Chinese takeout for dinner, followed by a silly tired face emoji. She was playing normal, of course. Perhaps she really was tired from actual work for once, or from sneaking flirtatious messages all day under my nose. I replied, sure, whatever you want. On my way soon, had to see a patient last minute. Another lie easily spun. I collected myself. I'd accomplished a great deal today. Next up, the confrontation and execution phase, likely after meeting the lawyer tomorrow. Patience for maybe another day or two, gather PI's initial findings, then strike. That evening at home was unremarkable on the surface. We ate takeout and watched a bit of news. She mentioned something about being asked by an old college friend to grab coffee on Saturday. Likely another lie or cover if she planned to see him. Though weekends were harder since I was usually around, more likely they stuck to work days. I told her I might trade a shift on Saturday anyway. Let her think I might be gone. Maybe it'd encourage her plan. As she headed to bed early, claiming a headache, I stayed up and quietly continued compiling a dossier of everything. Printing out copies of the incriminating texts and emails, saving them to a thumb drive too, organizing the photos and logs. I also drafted an email to Nathan directly from an anonymous account. Something menacing like, I know who you are and what you're doing. Enjoy your time while you can, it's running out. I didn't send it, just fantasized about scaring him. But better he be oblivious until the hammer falls. Before turning in, I peeked in on Rachel. She was asleep, looking the picture of innocence. I wondered if she dreamed of him. I wondered if she even really felt guilt or if she just said that in text to seem less terrible. My guess? Minimal guilt. After all, she came home and lied to my face with ease. I slipped under the covers quietly. Tonight, unlike the previous night, I didn't lie awake in anguish. I lay awake in anticipation, running through scenarios of the days to come. I pictured the moment I'd confront her, likely after papers were filed, so she couldn't preempt. Perhaps orchestrated in a way that shocked her. Perhaps serving her at work to maximize effect? Or maybe at home with her parents on video call to witness to double the shame. So many possibilities. And Nathan, I envisioned confronting him too. Maybe a face-to-face meeting where I throw down the evidence and watch his smug face fall. Or perhaps I'd rather go through his destruction without ever giving him the courtesy of a direct interaction. Let him piece together how his life collapsed after the fact. Part of me did crave a direct confrontation, though, to look him in the eye and let him know I was the one who ruined him in return. To get perhaps one good punch in if I could get away with it. We'd see. Tomorrow, I'd meet the shark lawyer and set the legal wheels in motion. The trap was nearly ready to spring. As I finally drifted off, I felt the nightmares stirring at the edges of my mind, threatening. But I pushed them back with a reminder. This time, in waking life, I hold the gun and I'm filling the chambers. Soon, it will be time to pull the trigger on their lives. The reckoning. 2 days later, the stage was set. Every piece of my plan was in position, and D-Day, Divorce Day, or perhaps Destruction Day, had arrived. In the intervening days, events unfolded rapidly. My meeting with attorney Eleanor Strauss was intensely productive. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with an intimidating presence and a no-nonsense attitude. When I laid out the affair and the evidence I had, her eyes glinted. We discussed goals. I wanted a swift divorce, no reconciliation attempts, and I wanted to retain as much as possible, the house, my assets, and avoid paying alimony. Given we had no kids, it simplified some matters. In Ohio, adultery isn't directly penalized in splitting assets or support, but Eleanor had strategies. We can file on grounds of adultery, which, while not necessary, sends a message. Sometimes a judge might indirectly factor egregious behavior, she said. More importantly, if she's spending marital funds on this affair, hotels, gifts, we can claim dissipation of assets. And we can leverage the threat of exposing the affair in public records or to her employer to push for a favorable settlement. I grinned at that. I definitely plan to expose it to her employer regardless. Eleanor arched a brow. Just be careful not to make it seem like extortion. But yes, knowledge of the potential professional fallout can be motivating for her to sign an agreement. We prepared divorce papers with adultery cited and a proposed separation of assets that basically gave me the house, since I'd paid more into it, and majority of liquid assets, leaving her maybe a small fraction of savings and her own car and personal accounts. Essentially, I'd keep 80%. It was aggressive, but not entirely absurd, given our incomes weren't hugely far apart and it was a relatively short marriage in legal terms. 7 years, mid-30s age, both employable. If she fights, a court might go more 50-50, Eleanor admitted. But our aim is she won't fight to avoid scandal. We'll hold the affair evidence as a trump card. We also drafted a separation agreement where she waives spousal support explicitly. Eleanor suggested also adding a morality clause, not enforceable per se, but symbolic that due to her misconduct, she acknowledges these terms. It could scare her. I authorized Eleanor to hire a process server to be on standby. We tentatively planned to serve Rachel at home on Friday evening. It was Wednesday when we met, and I wanted to move fast. Friday was ideal because, as it happens, that was the day Midland was publicly announcing the merger, and I had my own plan to drop a bomb that day. Over those days, the PI, Jim, did stellar work too. By Wednesday evening, he emailed me a report of his surveillance. On Wednesday, Nathan indeed left work at 5 p.m., drove to a wine bar, and met not my wife but another colleague, a man, for a short drink, then went home. No affair meetup that day. But Thursday was gold. Jim followed Nathan from his office at 12:15 p.m. as he drove to a boutique hotel, the Kingston Hotel, across town. There, he picked up Rachel, who had apparently driven there herself from her office, likely under guise of a long lunch or outside meeting. They entered the hotel together arm in arm. Jim managed to snap photos of them entering the lobby looking cozy. They stayed about an hour. He couldn't follow to the room, of course, but caught them coming out around 1:30. He got photos of them kissing goodbye at their cars. Apparently, they drove separately back to work afterward. I remember receiving that report and photos while sitting in my office and feeling both fury and grim satisfaction. More ammo and proof of a new instance of physical meeting. Jim also included a note. They appear to have a routine rendezvous perhaps weekly. Got clear shots as requested. We'll continue if needed. I decided this was enough. I had earlier evidence from Tuesday and now Thursdays too. We were at critical mass. Additionally, Jim's background digging provided some juicy tidbits. Nathan's departure from Chicago indeed followed a quiet settlement with an ex-employee who accused him of coercion during an affair. Basically exactly what I suspected. That woman still lived in Chicago. Her name was given. Possibly a witness, or at least proof of a pattern. And one more kicker. Nathan was still legally married. Separation, not divorce. His wife, Laura Keener, had apparently been living apart in Chicago for the last year. He relocated alone. The divorce was ongoing, with rumors it was contentious regarding finances. So he was cheating on his estranged wife as well. I wondered if the affair that caused the scandal was with the colleague's wife or his own wife found out. Not sure. But anyway, he wasn't free and clear. This was almost too perfect. because exposing his affair could impact his divorce if their separation agreement or state law took adultery into account. Illinois had some fault elements, I think. If I informed Laura Keener, she might have a field day using it against him, or at least taking him to the cleaners. I made a note to reach out to her soon. Thursday night, I barely spoke to Rachel. I told her I had a migraine after work and just needed to rest. She gave me space, likely relieved I wasn't in a chatty mood. For all I know, she was texting Nathan right next to me as I lay in bed. It was hard to keep it together, knowing what I'd do the next day. Friday arrived. This was the day of the big merger announcement at her company. She left early, excited. In an ironic twist, she got that promotion she'd been working for. The merger's success meant she'd be made finance director, she told me proudly over morning coffee. She assumed I'd be proud. I feigned enthusiasm, congratulated her, all the while thinking, you have no idea that by tonight, you might not have a job at all. I dressed and prepared as usual, but took the day off from the hospital. I had arranged coverage, citing personal emergency. Instead, I set up my war room at home, files, evidence, copies. Step 1. At 10 a.m., I composed an email from my anonymous account and sent it to multiple high-level people at Midland, specifically the CEO, the head of HR, and CCD, the General Counsel's office. I made the subject line urgent. Ethics concern, misconduct by VP N. Keener. In the email, I wrote succinctly that I wished to inform them that Mr. Keener was in a sexual relationship with a direct report. I named Rachel and her title. I mentioned this exposed the company to legal liability, given Keener's history too. I hinted this is not the first time records of a prior settlement in Chicago exist. I attached 2 photos. One of Nathan and Rachel entering the Kingston Hotel at lunch the previous day, and one screenshot of part of their text exchange where she said, "Don't worry about Dan. He doesn't suspect a thing." That line showed clear deceit in work hours. I also said I had more evidence and that if the company did not act, this evidence would be made public, something the press might find newsworthy given the merger announcement. This was a calculated threat. Merging companies hate scandals. After hitting send, I smiled, imagining the scramble that might ensue in their corporate offices on the biggest day of their year. Step 2. At 11 a.m., I sent a text to Rachel. "Congratulations on your promotion. I'm so proud of you. How about celebratory dinner tonight? I'll cook your favorite. See you at home. Love you." I wanted her to come home at normal time, unsuspecting. Meanwhile, I arranged with the process server to be waiting down the street to serve her around 6:30 p.m. at home, ideally just as she arrived or shortly after. Step 3, noon. I called Laura Keener in Chicago. I had gotten her number through a bit of social engineering called Nathan's old office, pretending to be from his bank needing to update contact. They gave me a number on file. Somewhat sneaky, but it worked. She was surprised to hear from a stranger, but when I explained I had information about Nathan's activities in Columbus that could be relevant to her divorce, her tone changed to eager. I delicately gave this outline that he'd been carrying on an affair with an underling, my wife, with proof, and that he had possibly harassment history. I offered to share evidence if needed. Laura was silent, then said with bitterness, "That doesn't surprise me at all. I'd absolutely be interested in anything you have. That bastard." I emailed her a package of goodies, photos, the text transcripts, and details of the Chicago settlement info that Jim dug up. She thanked me profusely and said, "Good luck. It's awful what you're dealing with, but I appreciate this. He's fought me tooth and nail. This might give me leverage to finally pin him." We had a brief commiseration moment. 2 betrayed spouses aligning in mutual purpose. It felt oddly good. Step 4, the final confrontation setup. I printed out about a dozen 8x10 color photos, him and her kissing, entering hotels, etc. I also printed the text transcripts in large font. These I arranged neatly in a folder. Additionally, I wrote a letter, a raw first-person letter to Rachel detailing how I found out, how deeply she hurt me, and exactly what consequences were coming. I likely would say a lot to her face, but I wanted to leave her with something to read after, to let her know all the emotions as well. It was somewhat cathartic writing it. I poured out my sense of betrayal, my disgust, and that there was no coming back. By 5 p.m., I got an email from Midland's HR, a terse message. Your message has been received and is being addressed. We would appreciate any further evidence you can provide. I smirked. I bet they were scrambling. I didn't respond. I'd let them stew a bit, maybe release more after the weekend. But I was satisfied that at least the warning shot was delivered. Perhaps by now Nathan and Rachel were being quietly pulled aside. Or maybe not yet, maybe Monday they'd act. Regardless, ball was in motion. At 5:30, I got a text from Rachel. On way home soon. Leaving office now. Can't wait to relax. So, I simply replied, drive safe, see you soon. My heart was starting to pound in anticipation. This was it. I set my phone to record audio discreetly for evidence or just my memory, and placed it in my shirt pocket. Then I positioned myself in the living room. I had the folder of evidence on the coffee table. At about 5:50, her car pulled into the driveway. I peeked through the curtain. The process server's car was parked down the street. He saw her too and started prepping. She came in through the front door beaming. She held a bottle of champagne, likely a gift from someone at work for her promotion. Honey, I'm home, she sing-songed playfully, kicking off her heels. I stood in the living room doorway, arms crossed. Hey, Rach, I said evenly. She noticed my posture and probably my expression was stony. Her smile faltered a touch. Everything okay? I nodded slowly. We need to talk, Rachel. Why don't you have a seat? She looked a bit confused by my formal tone but said, sure. But first, guess what? I got the promotion, director level. She was trying to gauge my mood. I didn't smile. I just replied, I heard. Congratulations. My flat delivery made it sound not at all celebratory. Now she was definitely sensing something off. Dan, you're scaring me. What's wrong? I motioned to the sofa. She hesitated, then came over and sat. I remained standing a couple feet away, looking down at her. I realized in that moment how small she looked somehow, despite all her confidence. Or maybe it was just that I was seeing her without the veil of love, just a lying cheat who thought she was in control. I took a deep breath. Time to drop the mask. What's wrong, Rachel? I said, voice cold. I think you know. Her brow furrowed. I really don't. Did something happen? I let a beat pass, then said quietly, I know, Rachel, I know everything. Her eyes widened just a fraction, but she still played dumb. What do you mean? You know what? I clenched my jaw, then in one motion picked up the folder from the table and tossed it onto her lap. The contents spilled out, photos sliding into her hands. She instinctively grabbed them and began to shuffle through. I watched her face closely. The first photo was of her and Nathan kissing by her car in the Kroger lot. I had that one printed, though a bit grainy. The next of them entering the hotel, another of them inside the car at the motel. As she flipped, her face drained of color. Her mouth parted as if to speak, but no words came. Then the text printouts, her own words declaring love and lies. At that moment, right on cue, the doorbell rang. She jolted, looking up at me with panic. Who? Why don't you get that? I said. My voice was hard. Clutching the incriminating papers, she moved as if in a daze to the door. I followed just a step behind. She opened it, and the process server, a young guy, confirmed her name and held out an envelope. Mrs. Carter, you've been served. He placed the envelope in her limp hand and walked away. She stood there in the open doorway, envelope in one hand, evidence in the other, staring out after him in shock. Slowly, she turned to me. Her eyes were filling with tears now, confusion and fear. Dan, what is this? She knew, but was struggling to accept the reality crashing down. Divorce papers, I said bluntly, citing adultery with all the proof needed. I'm divorcing you, Rachel, and not only that, by now your boss, your lover, is probably facing the end of his career. I've seen to that. The HR, the CEO, they all know. I made sure of it. She gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, oh my God. Her eyes darted back to the photos in her other hand. She suddenly dropped them as if they burned. Dan, it's not what it looks like. I let out a bark of incredulous laughter. Don't you dare insult my intelligence further. Not what it looks like? Really? You're actually going to try to lie now? I stepped closer, picking up one of the fallen photos and holding it up to her face. This is you, Rachel, with him. I've known since Tuesday. I watched you tell me bold-faced lies day after day as you carried this on, so don't even attempt to deny. She dissolved into sobs then, covering her face. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I never meant. It just happened. Spare me, I snapped, feeling years of hurt and anger welling. It didn't just happen. You actively chose to betray me over and over. In cheap hotel rooms and in our own bed by sneaking messages, you lied, you cheated, you humiliated me. She sank to her knees, actually kneeling on the floor in the entryway, sobbing. Please, Dan, we can talk about this. I was going to end it. I swear. I was overwhelmed with work and he pursued me. I was weak. I shook my head in disgust. You've been carrying on for months at least. Don't pretend this was a momentary lapse. I have everything. Your sweet little texts about how you have no guilt with him, how I didn't suspect a thing, how alive he made you feel, how you told him not to worry about me, the boring husband. She looked up, mascara running. You? You read my messages? She said faintly, mortified. I huffed. Yes, I did. And you know what? I barely recognized the woman in those messages. The woman who was my wife is gone if she ever existed at all. Dan, I'm still me, she pleaded, trying to crawl forward and reach for my leg perhaps. I stepped back. Don't touch me. My voice was so sharp she flinched. A moment of silence as she sobbed quietly. I could feel my heart pounding but also a cold satisfaction. This was going exactly as I envisioned. After a beat, I continued, more quietly but firmly. We are done, Rachel. Finished. I've already hired a lawyer. Those papers in your hand outline the terms. Given your behavior, I think I'm being more than fair. She looked at the envelope, fumbling it open with trembling hands, pulling out the divorce petition. She skimmed through tears and her face crumpled further. You're taking the house and most of our savings. Dan, how will I? She looked up desperately. Please don't do this. We can work this out. We can try counseling. I gave a humorless laugh. Counseling? Are you serious? This was not a minor marital spat. You shattered every vow and ounce of trust. There is nothing left to save. And yes, I am keeping what I earned. I'll not let you profit from betraying me. She swallowed, a flicker of something crossing her face. Perhaps realization that the nice guy husband she knew was truly gone. In his place was someone as merciless as she'd been. Suddenly, her expression shifted to anger through the tears. You went to my job? You told my CEO? Dan, that could ruin me. I leaned in, my face contorted with contempt. Yes, it will ruin you professionally, likely. And him too. Do you think I care after what you two did to me? After the hell you put me through while I blame myself for our distance? You deserve every consequence, and so does he. She sat back on her heels, shaking her head. I can't believe you'd... I know you're hurt, but to destroy my career, my promotion. She almost had an accusatory tone as if I overreacted. That lit a fire in me. Unbelievable, I spat. You're actually upset about your career? What about our marriage that you destroyed? All the years I supported you, loved you, and you threw it away for that sleaze, and you think I should leave your precious job intact? No, Rachel. Actions have consequences. You're not special. You made your choices freely. She broke down crying again, rocking slightly. Please, I'll quit the job. I'll cut him off. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. Don't do this. She reached out pathetically toward me. I stepped back again, crossing my arms. I felt a slight tug at my heart. After all, this was a woman I once deeply loved, now in utter misery on the floor. But I steeled myself, recalling the images of her and him. Any pity was quickly snuffed by righteous anger. It's far too late and you know it, I said quietly. Were you thinking of me when you were in his bed? When you told him you loved him? Or was that all lies too? She moaned. I never really loved him. I was confused. It was like a spell I can't explain. He was powerful and attentive and I felt... She stopped, seeing my cold stare, then switched tacks, voice breaking. You have every right to hate me. I hate myself. I don't know why I did it. I'm so sorry. I let her apologies hang in the air for a moment. Then I spoke, voice low and firm. You're going to sign those divorce papers. You're going to comply with whatever is needed to get this done quickly. If you fight or drag this out, I will make sure every one of your colleagues, every family member, all our friends, get a detailed package of what you've done. I have it all prepared. Don't doubt me. I will utterly destroy whatever remains of your reputation. So don't test me on this. Her tear-streaked face looked utterly defeated. She nodded weakly. I'll sign. I'll do whatever you want. Just please, please don't tell my parents. Or, God, everyone. She hiccuped a sob. I felt a grim sense of victory. That's largely up to you. Cooperate and I keep it civil and quiet between us. Resist and I go nuclear publicly. Your call. She nodded again, wiping her nose with her sleeve, her whole body trembling. I realized then that I felt nothing but emptiness for her at that moment. Maybe a tiny bit of pity, but mostly emptiness. The love was gone, replaced by a void. And that void would eventually be filled with new things for me, new happiness, I hoped. But for her, she'd have to live with the void she created. There's one more thing, I added, making sure she heard. Your lover isn't getting off easy either. His wife has been informed. Rachel's head snapped up. His wife? But they're separated. They are still legally married. And she's eager for any ammo to bleed him dry in their divorce. I provided her with plenty. Also, the state medical board might be interested to know a certain Dr. Keener. Rachel's eyes went wide. Dan, he could lose his license. I cut her off sharply. I don't care. He played with fire. If he loses everything, that's on him. She slumped, sobbing softly again. I checked my watch. Frankly, I'd had enough of this scene. I'd done what I came to do. I'll give you a few minutes to gather some basics, I said coolly. You're leaving here tonight. This is my house now. Go stay with a friend or a hotel, I don't care. I'll have your things sent later. She looked stricken anew. You're kicking me out? Tonight? Yes. I can't stand to be under the same roof as you. Go stay with Loverboy. Oh wait, he might be busy answering to HR or his wife. My sarcasm was cutting. Maybe a motel. That should be familiar territory for you. She actually flinched as if slapped, but I felt no regret. After a long moment, she nodded, defeated. She stood on shaky legs and numbly walked toward the bedroom. I followed to the doorway and watched as she grabbed a duffel and stuffed some clothes and toiletries randomly. Her movements were clumsy, as if in a nightmare. Tears kept falling. I leaned on the doorframe, arms still crossed. Return your house key, please, I said flatly. She paused and with trembling fingers removed it from her keychain. She set it on the dresser. What about the car? It's in both our names. Keep it for now. We'll sort it out in the divorce. I could claim it, but I'm not heartless. You'll need it to find a new job, if anyone will hire you after this. She closed her eyes at that barb, fresh tears leaking. How did it come to this? She whispered hoarsely. I didn't answer. The silent answer hung heavy. Because you destroyed us with your choices. A few minutes later, she had her bag. We walked in silence to the front door. She turned to me, face blotchy and anguished. Dan, I know you'll never forgive me. I want you to know I truly did love you. I never wanted to hurt you. I was selfish and stupid, and I'll regret it forever. I stared at her unmoved. I'm sure you will. She hesitated as if hoping for some softening. Finding none, she lowered her head and stepped out into the dusk. I watched as she went to her car. Before getting in, she looked back at me one last time, her face a portrait of misery. I met her eyes with a stony gaze. Then, I simply turned around and closed the door. The moment that door shut, I felt an incredible weight lift off me. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was done. The confrontation, the immediate retribution, done. Walking back inside, I noticed the scattered photos on the floor, the detritus of a broken marriage. I gathered them calmly and put them back in the folder. I'd save them in case needed for legal follow-through, but I hoped I'd never have to look at them again. I sat down on the couch alone in the silent house. Our house, which now felt different, tarnished by what happened, yet also like mine solely, reclaimed. I should have felt sad, and a part of me did feel a sorrowful closure of an era. But overwhelmingly, I felt relief and a grim sense of accomplishment. They say revenge doesn't truly heal you, but I have to admit, at that moment it felt damned good to see justice served by my own hand. She had nothing, lost her husband, likely her job, her lover soon to be ruined, and her good name under threat. He would be facing, at the very least, unemployment, a vicious divorce outcome, and perhaps even discipline, if I kept pushing to any professional boards. They both would experience the free fall that they so casually put me through when I discovered their affair. I thought of Nathan. Likely around that time he was getting an angry call from his CEO or maybe being confronted with evidence. Or maybe it had happened Monday. If not, I had more bullets to fire. I hadn't even sent the Chicago info to the CEO yet. I would if they didn't act. Either way, I doubted he and Rachel would be embracing a happily ever after. Most likely they'd end up blaming each other for the fallout. Let them. There was no trust in a relationship born of deceit and stress. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. Surprisingly, I didn't feel the urge to cry. Maybe I'd done that enough in the dark earlier in the week. Now was the start of something new. Painful, yes, but also freeing. On the coffee table, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I recognized it as Laura Keener's, since I'd saved it. Just heard from my lawyer. Apparently Nathan's attorney contacted him to try to settle ASAP. He must have gotten wind that I have new evidence. Thank you, truly. If you ever need anything, call me. And if it helps, he's absolutely miserable right now from what I hear. Laura. I allowed myself a small smile. Then another text came, this one from my lawyer, Eleanor. Received word, opposing counsel, Rachel's, reached out. She intends to sign without contest. Quick resolution likely. Good work. I replied simply, thank you. Setting the phone aside, I exhaled slowly. It was over. Epilogue. 2 years later, on a balmy summer evening, I found myself on the patio of a riverside restaurant in downtown Columbus, watching the sunset reflect off the Scioto River. Beside me, Emily laughed as I recounted a humorous ER story from earlier that week. Some things never change. ER always provides wild anecdotes. Her hand slipped into mine on the table, and I felt that warm glow of contentment that still sometimes amazed me. A lot had changed in the past 2 years, most of it for the better. The divorce was finalized swiftly after that fateful night. True to her word or fear, Rachel didn't contest a thing. She signed the papers, and by the end of that summer, our marriage was legally dissolved. The settlement left me with the house, which I promptly sold. I had no desire to keep living in it, too many memories, the majority of our savings, and no obligations to her. She kept her car and a small bank account to start over. We split our personal items amicably enough. I let her take some furniture and things I had no attachment to. The process was relatively drama-free, likely because she was in shock or penance mode. In the immediate aftermath, she moved back to Cincinnati to stay with her parents for a while. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had a rough time. Depression, some therapy, good for her, I suppose. She never contacted me except through lawyers for necessary items. I was fine with that. Professionally, she indeed lost her job at Midland. The official line was that she resigned, but I knew from an inside source that HR gave her a choice. Resign quietly or be fired for misconduct. So she chose to quietly bow out. Her once promising career in finance took a hit. Last I heard, she was working at a much smaller firm in Cleveland as just an accountant instructor. Ironically, not unlike the community college job she once scoffed Kathy ended up with in Indianapolis. I remember that detail painfully, but now ironically. As for Nathan Keener, his downfall was even more dramatic. Midland terminated him within a week of the affair coming to light. Apparently, the board was furious, and given the past whispers and potential liability, they cut him loose quickly. The merger still went through, but he got none of the credit or promised bonuses, obviously. Then his wife, Laura, absolutely savaged him in their divorce, with the evidence I provided. He ended up having to pay heavy alimony and gave her a large chunk of his assets. Combined with losing his executive job, he was in a bad spot. Last I heard, he left Columbus entirely. Rumors said he was in some small consulting role out in Arizona, far from any big corporate action. Fittingly, far from my world as well. Legally, I did not pursue any alienation of affection, not an option here, or such, but I did quietly send a packet of info to the state medical board's ethics division, highlighting a pattern of sexual misconduct with subordinates. Whether they did anything formally, I'm not sure, but given he wasn't practicing medicine, he was an exec, not a practicing doctor anymore, they might not have had purview. Regardless, his career in the corporate world was effectively over. The combination of my actions and his own flaws ensured that. In the months after, I focused on rebuilding myself. I sold the marital house, as I said, and moved to a new condo overlooking a park. A fresh space that was entirely mine, with no ghosts. I dove into work for a while, probably as distraction, but I also reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I even picked up old hobbies, like joining a weekend soccer league and volunteering with a medical outreach program. Therapy also helped. Yes, I went to therapy. I acknowledged that, as strong as I was in executing my revenge plan, I needed to sort through the emotional wreckage inside. The betrayal left deep scars, trust issues, self-doubt about why I missed red flags, anger that could easily sour into bitterness. But I refused to let it define me in the long run. With professional help, I worked through those feelings. By the 1 year mark since D-Day, I found I could think about Rachel or that time without a surge of rage or pain. It became a closed chapter, one I learned lessons from but no longer dwelled on daily. And then, when I was least expecting it, life brought someone new into my world. Emily was a nurse who joined our ER department about a year after my divorce. I remember we clicked right away when working a chaotic trauma together. Her humor, her empathy, her adventurous spirit. It was something I hadn't felt in a long time. When she asked me out for a beer after a tough shift, I realized I was actually ready to say yes. We took it slow. She knew I'd been through a rough divorce. I shared the broad strokes, though not all the dark details of revenge. No need to unload that initially. Slowly but surely, I let my guard down. I remember the first time I told her I love you, about 6 months into dating. It felt frightening yet liberating. She said it back without hesitation. Trusting someone again was perhaps my greatest victory over what happened, that I could still risk my heart. Now, a year later with her, I am genuinely happy. It's not the naive happiness of my first marriage's early days. It's a more mature, tested happiness. I appreciate what I have so much more. Emily knows the gist of my past. One night, I even opened up and told her more details, not to brag, but because she asked gently what happened with your ex. I spared some of the more vindictive specifics, but she gleaned enough to know I had executed some serious payback. Her response surprised me. She squeezed my hand and said, "Well, I can't say he didn't deserve it. I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm so glad it didn't break you. You're a good man, Dan. With me now." Those words meant everything. I realized she was right. I hadn't let it break me. If anything, I rebuilt as a stronger version of myself. Back at the patio, as the sun dipped low, Emily clinked her wine glass to my beer. "To us," she said brightly, eyes sparkling. I smiled genuinely. "To new beginnings," I replied, feeling the truth of it in my bones. Out of sheer curiosity, I still occasionally heard little updates through the grapevine about Rachel. Columbus isn't that big, and mutual friends slip news sometimes. I learned that she never married again. She dated a little per social media, but nothing serious. She had reached out to one of my friends asking how I was about a year ago, but he wisely kept it short. I harbor no desire to see or talk to her again. I long ago deleted her number and emails. The last interaction was signing the divorce papers at the lawyer's office, where she appeared hollow and couldn't even meet my eyes. That was closure enough. I'm not sure if she fully recovered from the consequences of our saga. Part of me hopes she has found some path to peace or at least learned from it, though she'll never get the life she had back. The cynical part of me feels she got exactly what she deserved. Maybe both are true. As for Nathan, I couldn't care less beyond the intellectual note that justice was served. Laura actually sent me a holiday card last year, funnily. Just a generic update with a handwritten note. "Doing great. Got what I needed. Thanks again." I chuckled and wished her well silently. The nightmares that used to plague me, those stopped completely within months of the divorce. When you remove the source of toxicity and know you stood up for yourself, it's amazing how the subconscious quiets. These days, I sleep soundly next to the woman I love. If I dream, it's of hopeful things. Maybe marrying again, starting a family, if fate allows. I haven't proposed yet, but I'm strongly considering it as our relationship deepens. I won't lie and say there's zero trauma left. Occasionally, something will trigger a memory, like seeing a couple having a furtive argument might flash me back to that parking lot discovery moment. But it's fleeting and doesn't consume me. I truly feel like that dark chapter, as painful as it was, ultimately forged a better path for me. I emerged not just as a winner in the revenge sense, but as someone who reclaimed his self-worth in life. Emily excuses herself to the restroom, and I gaze at the sunset colors. For a moment, I recall a line I wrote in that letter to Rachel the night I kicked her out. I had said, "One day I will be happy again with someone new, and you will be nothing but a distant bad memory." I hope that haunts you. Perhaps it did haunt her, I'll never know. But I realize it doesn't matter. What matters is that it turned out true. I am happy again, beyond what I thought possible in those bleak moments. When Emily returns, she wraps her arms around my shoulders from behind and kisses my cheek. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asks. I place my hand on hers and smile. "Just thinking how lucky I am." She laughs, coming around to sit on my lap playfully. "We're both lucky." As I hold her close, the last rays of sunlight catching her auburn hair, I know that the chapter of vengeance and bitterness is closed. In its place is a future I fought hard for, one of honesty, love, and hope. I paid a heavy price to get here, and so did those who wronged me. In the end, I can live with that. We all earned our fates. My ex-wife and her lover lost everything that truly mattered. And me? I gained a second chance at life. And that is the sweetest victory of all.